Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today, and I thought today I should make a video on the site that I think is the most ancient and the one that I have not dedicated a single video to where I have talked about it. And we are going to go down into Nan Madol today, and I have made a video on Nan Madol where I just showed you what was there, and it was just set to music. And I've also just mentioned it briefly in a few videos, but today this very important and probably very, very ancient site gets its own video. So let's fly into Nan Madol here on the island of Ponape in Micronesia. But this is all that is left of Nan Madol today. Just what's peeking out of the water here. And this whole area is built of structures made of columnar basalt. I will show you that in a second here. But the big mystery is, why are these ruins emerging from the water? Well, I'll tell you my theory here. We have ruins around the world that when sea levels rose over 9,000 years ago, and back in that period, some were just covered up and now are underwater, and some remain above land because they were originally on a high altitude down in this area, such as Gunung Padang, and I will show you a little bit from that site towards the end of this video in a really strange video I found. And this site here just appears to me to be kind of in between being underwater and originally at such a high elevation that it's still today above land. It's right in between, and this makes it a very unique site, and a lot of questions have to be asked here. But I'm going to show you some things today that you have never seen about Nan Madol. But here you see structures that are under the water. And obviously, whoever was building here was not building under the water. They were not building underground amusement parks for divers to go see. So this seriously suggests that it was built before sea levels rose. And this is a massive area, and it's a massive city. And I don't believe one word I read about ancient history from some places, and this is one, that it really doesn't make any sense. This was built maybe 1,500 years ago and then completed 700 years ago. They have no clue. They have no clue. Now, is this the remains of Lemuria or ancient Mu, or better known as ancient Atlantis, which I think is just a general term for an ocean-going, seafaring civilization? I don't think there is any one specific spot called Atlantis. I think it's just a general term that Plato used. And what really needs to be brought up is the one world ocean in antiquity was known as the Atlantic. There was not an Indian or Pacific Ocean. It was all known as the Atlantic. So I think that hints that Atlantis is just a general term that Plato used for an ocean-going civilization, and it could have been worldwide. What does this place look like, and why is it built on this side of the island? Well, I'm going to show you exactly why, but let's go down and take a look here. Now here we are down at the ruins of Nan Madol, and here you see the massive columnar basalt structures, and there's just guesses to how much of this columnar basalt was brought into this area and brought in on rafts or bamboo boats. But these weigh between 5 and 50 tons, these columnar basalt stones here that were shaped into these structures. And is there a purpose here? Yes, there is. And it matches with other ancient sites around the world. And here is another look on Google Earth Street View. And if you just poke around, you can find a few of these pics on Google Earth. But here you see the ruins coming right out of the water and forming these structures. But if you look under the water here, you can really kind of make out the stuff under the water. And here you see it's coming right out of the water. And Nan Madol means the spaces in between, or something like that. I think that is what Nan Madol means, or the place in between. But I think this might have just simply been a location, an island in between places that people traveled, seafaring civilizations a long, long time ago that we have kind of lost track of. But this is called the Venice of the South Pacific. that is another name for it, but here you just get a clue of what this place looks like. And these stones are coming right out of the water. Now here is Pohnpei. I backed this up a little. And you really have to wonder how much landmass would have actually been here before sea levels rose. And it would have been substantial, maybe twice as much as what we see here today, sticking above the water's surface. But let's go down here. And the big question is, obviously, what is underneath the water here? And we'll go down to this area here. And somebody dove in this area. Somebody who made hundreds and hundreds of underwater dives, and of course that is Graham Hancock. So let's just go to a clip here where he tells us what he found underneath the water in this area.
What I actually want to draw attention to is Pohnpei, this island here in Micronesia, because Santa and I did a lot of diving there a few years back and spent a lot of time on Pohnpei. And lo and behold, at Pohnpei there is a series of structures called Nan Madol, which are made of exactly the same material as we find at Gunung Padang, and which even really look a whole lot like Gunung Padang. These are Gunung Padang on the top, and here is Nan Madol in Micronesia on the bottom. And Nan Madol stands on the edge of the ocean, and if you continue out, again, comparisons between Nan Madol and Gunung Padang. If you continue out into that ocean and get your feet wet and get underwater, you find that the structures continue underwater. And they continue for a long way underwater, down to about 110 feet beneath the sea. And there we find these huge pillars sticking up out of the seabed. In some cases the pillars are fallen, like this one, and covered in coral growth. And I'm struck by the incredible similarity between that fallen pillar and this huge megalithic piece from the island of Tinian, which is in the same general area.
Now I will leave a link for that full lecture from Mr. Hancock, and he is a badass. He did hundreds of dives in some pretty turbulent waters all over the world. I think he deserves tons of credit. But here you look at what is under the surface here, that Nan Madol. If this was built less than 2,000 years ago, then they were constructing all this stuff with tons of columnar basalt underwater. Does that make any sense? Nope. Now this little area here we can see maybe 7 or 8 of these little man-made islands that were made, and there are actually 70 of them on this island. But when I look at an ancient site, I like looking at it with the direction here facing directly north, and instantly I had an idea, and it was confirmed, and let me just show you here. But we are facing perfectly north at the top of the screen. So this structure here coming out, that is partially underwater, the very end of this, the very eastern tip of this, is the most eastern point of this structure, and that's hugely important, and this is going to connect with other ancient sites around the world, the Sphinx, Angkor Wat, Borobudur, other places. Now here is the very eastern tip of this underwater structure, and obviously, to me, this is a temple that is in honor of the spring equinox sunrise. And if you look here, on the spring equinox, the sun would come up right exactly over this distant mountain on this distant island. But that is clear. That faces directly east. That cannot be argued with. The sun on the spring equinox would come up right over this distant mountain. And that is archaeoastronomy at Nan Madol. Now, that spring equinox sunrise, I think, is a very important thing to mark. And if anybody else has talked about that, please leave a link for me, because I'd be very curious. But I don't think I've seen it. But did they mark any other alignments? Well, here we have an alleyway that goes this way and this way. And if you look here, this alleyway perfectly marks the north-south line. in this temple. They seem to know the cardinal points, and they mark the spring equinox, and that connects it to some of the oldest sites on Earth. Now, I am not going to repeat the standard model of history, which attributes all these ruins to civilizations that were here maybe 700, maybe 1800 years ago. But the total population of those civilizations, it's kind of ridiculous when you have to account for all the labor involved. Each citizen would have had to do Herculean efforts to account for all the building work here. It just seems ridiculous. And were they building underwater? That seems kind of ridiculous. But how do they go about dating a site like this? Well, some archaeologists found an ancient campfire where they were cooking some sea life. And they carbon dated it, and it came back to, well, whatever, about 1,000 years ago, whatever. So they say, okay, we have a fire here. We have a meal that was made 1,000 years ago. So, hey, this place was made 1,000 years ago. That's the kind of crap we have to deal with when looking into the truth in these ancient sites. And here is one more view down here. But this will show you how these stones were put together. And there is legend coming from this area that this site is the place of ghosts. And a long time of here, magicians or genies or some people with some magical abilities were levitating these stones, and that's how they got them into place. And there are similar legends coming from places like Egypt and other places they used megalithic stonework. I just thought I should mention that. Now, it is only guesstimated how much columnar basalt was brought in here somehow, but the totals range from 750,000 tons to 200 million tons, and that's a huge range there. But those are the reports I've read, and I guess it's obviously very hard to estimate how much columnar basalt in total tonnage was brought in here, but it's massive, and it's unexplainable. Now, I made this video a couple months ago about the very ancient site of Gunung Padang, and it is fascinating. Carbon dating shows this dates from 13 to 23,000 years ago, and this site is made with these columnar basalt columns, at least at the top of the monument. So is there any connection between Gunung Padang and Nan Madol? Well, I think that is a great question to be asked. Now, speaking of columnar basalt columns, I came across this video and the quality isn't that great, but this was made on an expedition to Gunung Padang. And of course, we have all seen video taken near the top of that structure with those columnar basalt columns kind of scattered about. But here, they are obviously down in the jungle. And what exactly are we looking at here? But there is massive columnar basalt columns rising up here underneath the jungle canopy. And this, I'm just confused to what I'm seeing. Has anybody been down below the top of the structure at Gunung Padang? Is this what the lower structure looks like? These massive columns coming out of the ground? That looks like they were put here with intent and purpose. And when we pan over here, and I apologize for the poor video quality, but this video was made a few years ago, but here you see some more of those columnar basalt columns. Are these formed right below the top of the pyramid at Gunung Padang? I have no idea. But here you see some columns actually sticking out in much the same way they were formed at Nan Madol. I find that interesting. What are we looking at here? Is this the base of the pyramid at Gunung Padang? I have no idea. But I thought I would share this. I've looked at this many times, and I really don't know what I'm looking at here. But I think any possible connection to Gunung Padang is very interesting. And they are building with similar materials, and it appears to be in kind of a similar way. But here are a few more peaks at Nan Madol. And this is a fascinating site. It seems a lot of this is still under the surface of the ground and out in the ocean, which gives us our greatest clue that this site is very, very old, because when sea levels rose, that is a good marker, a good time marker. and it really can't be argued with. I think I've talked enough, but this is what is visible from imagery above Nan Madol, and that is pretty cool that these island structures were made. But if you look under this area, this whole region, this whole area of the island was made with columnar basalt structures, and if we could take away the canopy of the jungle here on this island, it would really freak us out. But that is a little look at Nan Madol, a little look at the archaeoastronomy that I don't think has ever been brought out before about that temple at Nan Madol. I think that is important because it connects it with other purposes of ancient temples from around the world. Hope you thought that was cool, and you all have a very nice day.